Alright. This is the first day of 11 Days of Remembrance. Uh, do this each year. I'm going to be reading from the Runai Gunner. Okay. Um, reached. Okay. Production. It has already been 3.5 hours since they left. His windy body is bouncing around like a rag doll. The 7 of the 120 bombers deployed to Berlin, looking out the turret blaster. He sees a sky too black. He's convinced stars are just a myth. The heater in the Ford cockpit doesn't reach back to where he is sitting, and at altitude the temperature is having uncomfortably around minus 12 degrees Celsius. With each breath, a thick fog looms in the foreign air as through him or punish him. He is not sure where he stomach twists and groans and protests, having had nothing but a few rations of tasteless food for the past week. He can hardly remember what a full night's sleep feels like. He's exhausted, cold, and hungry, but above all, he's scared as hell. He shakes his head, willing his bloodshot eyes to focus on the endless black horizon, searching for any signs of night fighters up here, 12,000 feet above the North Sea. And Ariel falls the rear turret, desperate the presumed dam of the Rolls-Royce uh, Venture propelling the 63,000-pound plane forward. A brilliant flash of red and white light fills the night sky, temperature blinding him. He struggles to refocus his ears, ready for the invisible thundering explosion. He knows what follows as he watches of his comrades' planes being ripped from the heavens, the sickened streets of wreckage as it falls to the ground. Miles below, a quick reminder that there was about the grace of good. He goes and errant's stillness follows as if the universe has offered a moment of silence for the fallen crew. It took less than a minute to eliminate 7 sons, fathers, and friends. Their short lives are marked by a faint smell of aviation fuel as it premieres the frigid air. All can think about in that brief moment is how grateful he is that he was spared. The crew's forsaken screams to meet their maker. He brings himself back. War doesn't allow him the luxury to grieve over his fallen friends. Men have has known since basic training, some maybe longer. He quickly reinforced a face the task at hand. They probably didn't even see the plane that just took them down. It's his job, it's to find the night fighters and kill them before they kill any more of his any more of his friends. Fear is irrelevant, especially if he wants to live to see tomorrow. He is Larry Sutherland, a farm boy from Nova Scotia. This is his story, a story about a man who lived through nightmares horror, a story about a man who experienced courage and value, a man who risked his life to that we may live in freedom. This is the story of Canada's top gunner ace. Okay, Chapter 1. Since the introduction was good, let's do Chapter 1. Early Memories. I am a nephew of Clarence Bentley Sutherland, known to his friends as Larry. It's been said that heroes are brave men who do extraordinary things. Desperate their fear, This is the story of one such man. It is also the story of thousands of air gunners and crews that flew missions with Bomber Command as members of the Royal Air Force RAF. The size and scope of the Second World War is hard to comprehend for those of us who have lived in relatively peaceful times. Our recently of war is limited to Hollywood movies or news stories of countries thousands of kilometers removed. We simply don't understand how personal yet fear-raking war can be. Joseph Stalin once said, "A single death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic." Here are the statistics. In Bomber Command alone, 55,000 men lost their lives in the air war over Europe. Larry Sutherland's squadron, the 207th, lost 1,180 men. 7,900 Lancaster bombers were built, and 3,400 of them were lost in action. Larry Sutherland is still living. Unfortunately, as time goes by, we are losing the brave men and women who voluntarily dedicated their lives to the fight for freedom. Every one of them had a story. Most of them who fought the war saw and experienced horrors we could never imagine. A lot of them came home and got on with their lives in relatively obscurity. The loan of a feat onto itself to re-enter a world without war when they had been so engaged in its chaos must have been an enormous adjustment. They did not have the psychiatric evaluations that today's military has. There has not no doctors to prescribe treatment for those terrors that witnessed. In fact, post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD) was not even recognized until the Vietnam War, 10 years after the end of the Second World War. We as Canadians have fallen with behind the Americans and the British in commemorating the achievements of our heroes in the air and on the ground. While these veterans are still living, we need to collect their stories and the whole of Bomber Command during the Second World War. There were only 3 heavy bomber aces in the air gunner or fighter pod who contained ace after achieving 5 kills with losses of his own. 1. Wallace McIntosh, RAF, tail gunner, 6 kills, 1 damaged, flying in Lancaster. 2. Peter Illingworth, RCAF, mid-upper gunner, 5 kills, 1 damaged, flying in a Halifax bomber. 3. Clarence Bentley, Larry Larry Sutherland, RCF, succeeded to the RAF tail and mid-upper gunner, 7 kills, 1 damaged, judgment and signing off by his commanding officers flying in Lancasters. Both Peter Unit and Wallace McIntosh have passed on. Larry is the last surviving heavy bomber ace. What makes Larry accomplish is he had a birth defect in one eye. His left eye would not move left or right or up and down. The problem with undiagnosed until his first RCF physical, he should not have been accepted into the air gunner training program, but as fate or irony would have it, that one wonky eye gave Clarence Larry incredible night vision. It's truly incredible that a young man with one faulty eye could benefit as air gunner and go on to be the top scoring aces. August 1954, East Mountain, Nova Scotia. My earliest memory of my Uncle Larry is from the year I turned 9, the spring of 1954, midwinter. Of that year, my mother had gone to be with Larry in Toronto for a month to help him through an illness caused by large bleeding stomach ulcers. The spring he came for a visit, my parents ran a little tourist business on land that was once part of Larry's family farm. Larry had asked me to go on a hunting expedition in the forest behind the old farm. He cleared the rifle. He had all the other members of the family learn to shoot with an old short-barrel 22 caliber single shot. These rifles were made in Belgium after the turn of the century by the hundreds of thousands, and you could purchase one for a few dollars. Loading the gun was achieved by pulling back a little knob and lifting the gun up with caused the little rack to move backwards to receive the single cartridge. When the knob was lowered and turned back one click, it sent back the also survived the safety. My mother had prepared 1 cup of chicken soup for Larry before we left. At the young age of 9, I couldn't understand why my uncle would eat so little. I was unaware that he had lost 3/4 of his stomach, which was removed to eliminate bleeding ulcers that had been plaguing him for months. Only massive tension fluids around surgery. He kept him alive. Looking back, I believe his sickness was a direct result of the stress of war. We were not far from home when Larry lost his cup of food. He just wiped his mouth with his handkerchief and said nothing. We arrived at the wooded area, began our pursuit of the enclave squirrel. Moments later, we heard a squirrel chatter. Larry cocked the old 22. He was teaching me the refined art of squirrel calling. When the squirrel stopped chattering, we stood in silence for a few moments, and directly behind us the squirrels started to chatter again. In one good moment, my uncle turned 180 degrees and fired the rifle from the hip. Mr. Squirrel was hit center. Honestly, I have never forgotten it. That's the end of chapter 1. I'll read chapter 2 tomorrow, and probably chapter 3 too. I just want to say thank you to the veterans who fought in World War One, World War Two, so I could do my videos, and so I can have freedom of opinion, and I could make videos, and I could do reviews. Thank you, and if you see a veteran, say thank you to them, or if they look sad, just walk up and be a friend, and just talk to them. Maybe I just want someone to talk to, and say thank you to them, because what they did was to make our society what it is today, for what their sacrifices were for us, so we can live in peace and we will not have to worry about the stuff that happened. Thank you to the veterans, and I'll read chapter 2 tomorrow. I'll read 2 chapters, and thank you to the veterans so I can make my YouTube videos.